Good late afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Town Council Study Committee. I am Tom Dixon, Select Board Member, ex officio member of the committee, chairing today's meeting only. And we will get into some of our agenda items, but we will be doing officers at a later meeting. Today's meeting is really purpose is get intros and figuring out a little bit of future business. So I'm going to read the script, the remotely conducted hybrid meeting for open meetings. We are using the Zoom for this meeting, which allows the public to participate in a meeting as an attendee. The chair can request that members of the public provide their names for the purposes of keeping accurate minutes of this meeting. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to this meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for this meeting. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will only call on those who have raised their hands in the order that were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, this is Tom Dixon, chair at the moment, chair of the Town Council Study Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons are anticipated on this agenda are present and can hear me. Rachel Mandel.
Yes.
Jill Veith.
Here.
Bo Barber.
Yep.
Curtis Barnes.
Yes.
Kelly Steffen.
Here.
Joe Grouse.
Here.
Caroline Balzer. Here. Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please confirm, respond in the affirmative. Lauren Goldberg from KP Law Town Council.
Here.
Um,
Donna.
That was over.
oh, excuse me, and Donna Martino of the non-voting taxpayers.
Here.
Thank you. Good morning good afternoon. Really reading the script. Good afternoon. This open meeting, the Town Council Study Committee is being remotely conducted pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment if anybody is on at an appropriate time. For this meeting, Town Council Study Committee is convened by video conferencing via the Zoom app, and we post on the town's website identifying how the public may join. All supporting materials that have been provided, members of this body, are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along the posted agenda unless I, the chair, notes otherwise. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each member to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold your name until your name is called. For items of public comment, after all members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public who have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Sound good, Lauren?
Sounds
All good?
perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll call this meeting to order. First meeting of Town Council Study Committee. Thank you for all being here and devoting your time to this committee. And from Mr. Barnes's vote or article at town meeting in the spring, and getting this up and ready. Thank you for Jeff for helming the remote capabilities over there, and Charles for setting it up. So the first item on our agenda is committee introductions and expectations. So I figured when we were working on the agenda, we would just go around the room and introduce ourselves and talk about a little bit briefly on why each of us wanted to or applied for the committee and what our expectations are for what they want to see to come out of this committee, and also for how often that they are able to commit to and would like to meet for this committee. So we start down on the other end. Rachel, if you please kick us off.
All right. Rachel Mandel. I decided to be a part of this because I had worked for the town for just shy of about 18 years. And it's still an important thing for me. There's a lot that I saw being on this side now, as well as working for the town or as an employee, trying to get certain things done that were frustrations and some that were efficiencies. And I just think Nantucket's grown a lot, and maybe it's a good time to start looking at, is this the right form of government for us to get things done the way we should be getting them done? I guess my expectation is to learn a lot about the different forms of government to see what might fit here the best. And I don't know, what else was I supposed to talk about? How can you give me? Oh, good question. I personally think that momentum on this committee is really important, so I don't think spaced out or less frequent meetings would be a good idea, in order, it's a pretty heavy group of material, and I think there's a lot to tackle, so I think the more frequent would be great. Having a younger family is harder for the evening, but I will do my best, hopefully, to keep up with the meeting schedule.
Got it. Thank you, Rachel.
Evenings are hard, but
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
I think it's when the trailer's available.
Yeah.
got it. Jill?
I'm Jill B and I, year-round resident on Nantucket, and I applied for this because I feel like definitely what's happened in observing town meeting, that the demographics there don't really line up with the larger demographics that we see in the clerk's office for the number of registered voters, and so I'd like to figure out if, again, what Rachel said, is there another form of government that is the right form of government or a better fit for us? And I'm happy to meet. I can see meeting more frequently earlier, and then maybe it gets less frequent, but I'm open to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Bo Barber. I'm a firefighter and a business owner. I work in construction. I've been a firefighter for 15 years. And like Rachel, seen a lot from the inside. And yes, I'm kind of like my colleagues here, I'm interested in learning about charter. See if there's anything we can do to provide better incentives for government. And I'd like to get this going. I think momentum is important, and also my family would appreciate if we do this now and just
Get it done.
Yeah. Got it. Thanks.
I'm Curtis Barnes. In a way, I guess I'm the godfather of the article. And my particular concern is that annual town meeting is our only legislative function once a year, unless we have a special. A town council, such as they have in Barnstable, meets every 2 weeks. It is the legislative function. And the whole point of that is we can accomplish things that need to be addressed, including the financial side, more quickly, more effectively. I think we should be meeting in person. I think we should try to meet bi-weekly to get going. I think it would be helpful if we to look at family concerns. When I was on the town council study committee with John Brescher and the team, we met at midday. We met often at 1 or 2 o'clock. So it's very flexible, and I would encourage us to meet frequently and regularly and keep moving this along.
Kelly?
Kelly Steffen, been coming here most of my life, been living out here off and on for about 10 years. Interested and involved in this because I want to find ways that possibly create a more inclusive and inclusive outlet for our constituency, and see if that's possible and what that looks like. And I guess the outcomes would be that there are more, the voting turnout is more representative. And availability, I think, is as much as is reasonably needed. No family yet, so I probably have a little more time, so I could be the flexible one. Thank you.
Joe Grouse. I have lived full-time on Nantucket since 2011, so I guess that's pushing 13 years. I was also a member of the finance committee that actually supported Curtis's article. I served 3 terms on the finance committee and sort of thought it was time to take a break. I'm interested in this committee and in this project because I think that Nantucket has outgrown town meeting. I think that it's a big enough enterprise that we need a legislative function that can operate sort of 12 months a year and make decisions on a more current basis rather than once or twice a year with a town meeting or a special town meeting. I also think that, as I think several folks have described, that the voters who attend town meeting aren't really that as representative of the population of the island as it could be. Sometimes, to be a wise guy, I say, it's a tyranny of the minority. That's probably not entirely fair, but I do think that a subset of the voters and the citizens of Nantucket who are very interested in town meeting are sort of good at coming to the meetings and swaying the arguments. So I think having an elected group of town councilors might be a better way to represent all the citizens of the island, but we'll see, I think, in the discussion. And then finally, I guess in terms of, I'm prepared to, spend as much time as the rest of the committee members want to spend, 2 meetings a month is probably as much as I think we would need, certainly in the next 5 to 6 months. One of the things I think we might want to think about is sort of working backwards from whatever town meeting we think we can complete the work by. So if it's town meeting 2005, you're gonna have to back into when the article that we might write has to be completed. So, I mean, I think in rough terms, if we wanted to make town meeting 25, we're really gonna have to finish our work by October of 2024, because I think that's when the due dates for articles are will happen. But anyway, maybe that's not the right. Did I leave anything out? Was that?
That's good.
That's me.
Caroline.
Thank you. I am, I've always considered Nantucket my home, but I've moved here over the last couple of years increasingly, and now I've fully moved here. And my son has gone off to college, so I have definitely availability to meet on a regular basis. I am really interested in group process, and I do think that meeting more regularly to a shorter end is better for this type of thing than stretching it out over a long period of time. I think it would help the group process to do that. But it may not be possible given people's constraints, but I do think that that's a good way of working. I'm really interested in inflection points and places where something has grown and shifted and then things need to be realigned. And I love the idea of a group process, people all sharing information together and then using that to figure out what is needed, what is best, and how to apply that. And I think that this is a really distinct inflection point. I know there have been other town council study committees before, and people have looked at this, but I think there's been so much change in the last 5-10 years that maybe it's a whole different problem to look at. And so I'm very intrigued by all of that. And when I was looking over biographies, I noticed a lot of you guys have experience with government, and I don't have that much experience with government processes, but I have a lot of experience with group processes and coming up with solutions to tricky problems.
Thank you.
Jeff. I'm Jeff Carlson. I'm a current town employee. I've been with the town. Apparently 18 is the magic number. I hit year 18 in May. So I've been a long time before that, worked in the private sector, and obviously part of a family that has a business in the private sector as well. Seen a lot of ins and outs from the town. I feel like we can probably sit here, Rachel and I, and talk about inefficiencies that we've seen over time and things that are better, without kind of rehashing what everyone else said. I think really one of my main interests in being here that hasn't come up yet is I think it's important in 2023 and 2024 to always be looking to find ways to be more efficient and improve and provide a clear and transparent decision-making process to the public that's here that can happen in an expeditious manner and not necessarily have to wait. I think that's one of the real challenges of town meeting now is, there's obviously some really cool historic value to town meeting, but I think it's just one of those where if something comes up the day after town meeting, you're putting decisions off and you're not able to handle those efficiently. And I also tend to agree with the group that, I have a lot of people, I'm not that old, in my forties, and a lot of friends and cohorts that have difficulties attending things like town meeting, just for kids and school and all kinds of challenges and conflicts, that finding a way to get that group reinvigorated back in government and involved, and maybe saying, I'm feeling more represented, maybe I can take some time to be on a committee or do something where we see attendance and applicants a little bit low. So it's just really, for me, a way to find a better way to improve local governance. And really kind of challenge that and see where we can go and put the best amount forward for our citizens here. As far as meeting schedules, I'm happy to meet as much as everyone else. I tend to agree with Rachel there. There's an important momentum, and I think there's an expectation of people where the article passed at regular town meeting and has been putting together and kind of gathering some momentum with the committee being formed. I think it's important to demonstrate a real commitment to moving the finance committee recommendation forward that was adopted at town meeting, doing that expeditiously. And so I think I'm happy to meet as often as we need to make that happen, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it is. But I do think that, especially early on, having more regular meetings, and then it maybe stretches out over time as things get worked on, but to really get everything moving.
Thanks, Jeff. Donna.
Well, I agree with what everybody else has said so far. I'm a seasonal resident, a member of the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers. So I really appreciate the opportunity to participate with Zoom. It's very important for us. When I followed Curtis's article, I just felt it was very important. We need a more efficient government. And I think the timing is now. There is so much going on the island. I've been coming to Nantucket since the early 70s, on and off for many years. And there's so many changes, and we need to keep up with them, and we need to address them. As far as attending meetings, how often you wish, and I do think it has to be done quickly, because I feel that we don't want this to drag on and on and on. I think we need to address it, get out information to the public as to how we're doing, what we're doing, engage the public, and so forth. And I'm happy to be a part of the group. This will be very interesting and exciting.
Thanks, Donna. And I would just add for myself, my expectations are, I think my own spot is a little bit of a funny one, being a member of the select board. And, obviously I'm chairing this meeting just to get us started, and then you guys can kind of figure out how you want to organize. I will certainly see myself as participating in as a citizen, and also from my perspective as a 6-month now select board member, and tell you, kind of interject what my thoughts are over the period, but certainly not as a select board member, right? I am here ex officio as Jill is for FinCom, but it's more that I'm here as a citizen, I think, and so I plan to participate as much as I can contribute to the committee, but really it's the bulk of it, as it should be. It's the bulk of what the committee thinks, and the expectations for whatever they want to see come out of this. So thank you for the intros, everyone. Introduce Lauren Goldberg, who from KP Law, Town Council, who's going to give us a little bit of overview of Massachusetts forms of government, and also an overview of open meeting law in Massachusetts.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad that I can be here with you all today. So the first thing that I thought I would talk about is just charters generally, to kind of give you an idea of what a charter can do, or what charters are usually for. Under the general laws, essentially, there is a form of government that exists. It's the open town meeting select board form of government. And I know that you guys have a charter that changes certain things, but one of the important things to remember is that the the general law sets forth a framework where it expects certain things to be accomplished by the legislative branch and certain things to be accomplished by the executive branch. And one of the things that charters do is it changes who has responsibility for those things that are addressed in state law. So adoption of a charter typically involves empowering a single individual, such as a town manager, administrator, to carry out some of the executive function that would otherwise land with the board, with the select board. And I think as towns have gotten more professional and bigger, that has happened more and more. Under the state law, there is a town administrator position, but that town administrator works just by and through the select board. So a charter really creates another form of government in and of itself. And every city and town that has a charter, even if they have the exact same words, they are implemented differently. Each city and town has its own personality, I guess, is what you'd say, its own set of documents, its own set of experiences. And so one of the things that I always recommend when I'm talking to newly appointed charter review committees is to definitely be interested in what other cities and towns have done, because it matters and they have lots of good examples. And I usually pull examples from certain areas of all sorts of charters when I'm trying to help a committee come up with language that it finds acceptable. But taking someone else's form of government off the shelf can be a challenge, because the things that work and don't work in your community may be different than things that work and don't work in other communities. And so just saying this is the fix before doing the investigation, before doing a diagnosis, coming up with an end game can sometimes be counterproductive, in that you just haven't something you're trying to fit in, fit all sorts of facts into, versus coming up with the facts, what works, what doesn't work. Why is town meeting once a year a problem compared to, would it be different if we had 2 town meetings a year? Would it be different if we had a representative form of town meeting? Those discussions will help inform whatever it is you wind up with. And you may well wind up with a town council form of government. And I know that was the warrant article, is to take a look at that. But in my view, without identifying what the problems are and what the benefits are of the way things are right now, it's dangerous, because you can go down a road that isn't going to fix what you hope. There's a lot of unintended consequences when there's changes to charters. And you guys have a pretty proactive charter. Your charter does a lot in terms of how it organizes town government. So any changes that you make to that, you're going to want to make sure that you're thinking through all the way. So what is an executive function versus what's a legislative function? And I think it's important to think about that, because a lot of times, especially with town council forms of government, I think there's this impression that the town council is kind of a super select board, meaning that they are doing more select board like things on a regular basis. And the reality is that the legislative branch is still the legislative branch, except for a few different tweaks. And one of those tweaks is appointing authority. So a town council will have the authority to appoint a town manager, whereas a select board would typically appoint a town manager. So if you think of the select board as the executive, and then whatever you see as town meeting as the legislative, it kind of falls into place a little more. The town meeting, or the legislative branch, is responsible for appropriations, so annual budgets and budget adjustments, but they don't create the budget. The budget is created by the executive branch, which then presents that budget to the legislative branch. The legislative body adopts laws and policies, and those laws and policies define how, or the breadth of what the town government is allowed or not allowed to do, but it doesn't mandate that the town carry out certain things. So we can go to town meeting, and town meeting could appoint, for example, could create a committee, and then that committee might not get appointed, or even if it gets appointed, it might not carry out the job that everyone thought it would do. It happens with acquisition of interest in real estate. Money's appropriated at town meeting for acquisition of a piece of property. Something happens in the interim, and it turns out it really isn't as good a deal as the town thought. The select board doesn't have to go through with that. It's authorized to go through it. So a lot of what the legislative branch does is authorize that. So it authorizes, essentially the adoption of local laws, including zoning, regular general bylaws. It authorizes projects and land acquisitions through its appropriation power. It approves certain fees in certain instances, sometimes through a bylaw and sometimes for different reasons. It creates ad hoc committees like this one, where the committees are essentially put together to study a particular issue or in a particular way and report back to town meeting. And also importantly, the legislative branch authorizes borrowing. So a town meeting does all those things. That's the same thing as a town council does. They have authority to adopt laws and to adopt policies, transportation regulations, things that you can imagine town meeting doing. And I know you guys have warrants with 98, warrant articles. And so that kind of stuff is the same kind of stuff that a council would do.
Except that, as I understand it, a town council is a much smaller number of
Correct.
individuals.
Yes.
Who exercise the same legislative powers as the X hundred or 1,000 people
That's-
who show up for a town meeting.
That's absolutely right. And it's a different way of dealing with the legislative responsibilities. Some communities have like 9 counselors and they think that's the right number. And Amherst, they changed from a town to a city and they have 13 counselors. And it's hard. You put 13 people together at the table. It's hard to get agreement on lots of issues, which doesn't mean they don't, and they do a fabulous job. But you have to be you have to be open to negotiations, essentially, rather than negotiating with all of town meeting, you're negotiating with the people that are at the table. What the council doesn't do, and I think it's important, or what the legislative branch doesn't do, is it doesn't carry out projects, it doesn't identify financial needs, it doesn't propose a budget, it doesn't issue warrants, as if we were going to talk about a town meeting, for example, the select board issues a warrant for the legislative body. It typically makes appointments and provides for daily operations, oversees personnel and related matters, responsible for procurement, and negotiates and executes collective bargaining agreements, which are also funded by town meeting. So those functions remain relatively siloed. And whether you have a manager or a mayor, the executive branch does a significant amount of the work, as it does today, regardless of whether town meeting meets once or twice or 4 times. Believe it or not, some towns have many special town meetings. Some of the differences in terms of the form of government, and basically all of town government is on a continuum. We could take what's in the general laws, which is select board with all executive, town meeting with all legislative, and then we can say, okay, well, the select board has some of the executive powers, but the town manager has additional executive powers. Or we could give some of those powers to like a super planning board, which is the town of Plymouth wanted to make a super planning board. Those types of things change the dynamic, even though it's still a select board, town administrator, or town manager form of government. So in terms of how these things play out, for an open town meeting, and that's still the most popular kind of legislative body in Massachusetts. It basically is of an unlimited size, so there's no restriction on how many people. And as happened in Truro the other night, you can plan for 501 and you can get 750, and you can't have a meeting because you can't fit them. The warrant is made generally available. Sometimes it's mailed, and that depends on people's charters, but it's not always mailed. The executive branch has the appointing authority for the finance committee, and then others are elected more directly by the voters. And typically at an open town meeting, there's no quorum except if it's set by bylaw. So it's not a requirement that there be X number of people that arrive in order for business to happen. A representative town meeting is a little bit different than that. So in a representative town meeting, it's kind of the halfway point between a council and an open meeting, because the members that are elected to the representative town meeting are people that are elected to represent their constituents. Typically that's by district. I know you guys have a single precinct, so that'd be something that you need to think about, whether for a council or for a representative town meeting. It does have to be created by a charter, just like a town council has to be created by a charter. Some of them are still large, over 200 or 250 people. Others are smaller, depending on, what makes sense. they tend to have somewhat, I would say, additional, but maybe it's different involvement in town meeting because they really own the decisions that they're making for the other people that they're representing. And so you tend to see a lot more information going directly to representative town meeting members, you know, to help them prepare for the meeting. So a lot of the times that's mailed directly, and it wouldn't just be the finance committee report, it would be plus all the memos and all the backups and everything that would relate, including the statutes and applicable bylaws. Representative town meetings have precinct chairs, and often they have a council of precinct chairs, which means essentially there's somebody who's kind of running each area of town in terms of getting input and feedback from the townspeople. And then
Political boss.
a political boss. They aren't though, but I'd say they're just really hardworking because they're out there kind of making sure that everyone gets their voices. One of the interesting things about a representative town meeting is they appoint their own finance committee through the moderator. And they typically also have a rules committee. So how is town meeting going to operate? Zoning and planning. And then in my experience, they always have a quorum. So you need a certain number of of elected representatives to show up in order to function. Then with a town council or city council form of government, it's another version of a representative form of government. Obviously, the people that are elected represent more people than in a representative town meeting form of government. Typically, there are district and at-large councilors, and that is, as I said, for whether you did any other kind of town meeting, if you're going to create a representative form of government, you're likely to have to look at how to divide up the town from a logistical standpoint. How do you create these different districts where people would be elected from? In terms of equity, my experience is that those districts are drawn so that different neighborhoods, essentially different areas of town, would get representation at the table, so that you wouldn't have just one area of town or one type of participant directing how the council were to behave. The council also, in terms of executive functions, has the authority in many ways to approve high-level appointments. So perhaps department heads, and that's more of an executive function than a legislative function. But it does give the council a lot of control over kind of the look and feel of government. Unless you have a mayor, the council president is typically the titular head of government or the ceremonial head of government. And the town manager through the executive branch is responsible for many of those things that the select board would typically have been responsible for. Because you're looking at a charter, you can have any version of that you like. There's no one right way. It's not like there's three forms of municipal government out there and you have to choose one. You can have whatever combination feels right after you, when you look at what you're gaining, what you're losing, what would be easier or harder, you have the ability to combine any of those aspects that you think are important to Nantucket, to keep feeling like Nantucket and acting like Nantucket, but also doing it in a more, as I heard everyone say, efficient way. So those are the types of things that you can be thinking about as, where does that authority go? If it would start with the select board, where should it be? Does it go to a town manager? Does it go to a group? Does it go to a council? And bearing in mind this whole difference between executive and legislative really helps, I think, set kind of an understanding of what the different authorities are. And I would recommend, especially if you're thinking about a town council or representative town meeting form of government, that you go over to Cape Cod and go to a representative town meeting. I think Falmouth has a representative town meeting, and Barnstable has a city council or town council, because it's really interesting to sit there and maybe you can watch on TV. I don't know what. Okay.
Barnstable's on.
Oh, good.
Every other Thursday.
Good. Yeah, it's important to watch, to get a feel for what it feels like, and to see, is that what you're looking for? And some of them are incredibly efficient, and some of them are not. And it really depends on the municipality and how it works. And you want to look at all the things that right now work as well as those that don't work, because if you just take what doesn't work, because of that unintended consequences, you're going to wind up changing things that work as well. So I'm jealous that you guys get to make such important decisions for your community because it is a very big responsibility. And obviously coming back to town meeting, you know, you have a large audience that you have to satisfy. And so one of the things that I always mention is, remember, not only do you have to find something that you all can agree on that, you know, meets the needs of the people at the table, but that you're also going to be able to sell to the greater town meeting, because this is just one part of that process. And that next part is just as important as well. So I think that is it, although I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this. I work with charters every single day of all different types of communities, councils, cities, and obviously towns of all sizes. Yes.
Don't we have to have a bylaw and a charter, or do we just change a charter?
So the charter takes precedence over the bylaws. So if you have inconsistent bylaws, they're going to cede to the charter.
I'm just asking what our function is. We only are looking at developing a charter.
That's right.
There's no bylaw that we have to present to the annual town meeting to implement a charter.
No, and I would say that what typically happens is that the charter is changed first, and then a group goes through the bylaws as well to identify those areas that need to be changed. But in the charter document itself, it needs to say what happens in the interim. And so usually you'll see a transitional provisions part of the charter so that it's clear what the protocol is going to be until those bylaws are reviewed.
Well, I was told by Act Now that we had to get 15% of our voters to look at changing the charter, and but John Giorgio said that wasn't necessary.
And I agree with John Giorgio. I always agree with John Giorgio,
I hope so.
yeah, it's not necessary. So
Okay.
There's
Well,
another
but-
way of doing it.
there's several
Everyone
ways.
should Know about that. If they
That's right.
really
There's
want to go back to town
yes.
meeting or not.
There's a petition process, which does wind up at town meeting. And doing it like this would also wind up at town meeting, because you don't go straight from here to a special act. You have to go through town meeting to get there.
Yeah, I understand.
The only difference is that if you're creating a charter and you get the 15% to file, that does skip town meeting. Not a charter amendment, but a brand new charter, you can totally skip town meeting. And so that is, that's a process that's out there. It's an alternate process, and they're all legitimate ways of doing things. It really takes for it to happen at the ground roots level for a petition to go to be filed, though, because you really need people to understand it. Everybody's elected, so they're representatives again. They have about a year and a half to 2 years to come up with a plan, whatever it might be, and to present that at an election after it's vetted by the AG. So we do see some some charter commissions, and usually they're called commissions, that are elected, but more typically, especially because it's hard to get that kind of grassroots support, we see committees such as this making a recommendation or a proposal to the select board and to town meeting.
Right, and that basically proposed the special legislation that would change the charter for the town of Nantucket.
That's right.
Correct.
Yes,
So the town meeting can say, yes, we like the idea, go.
the town meeting can say that, although I will say with big picture changes like forms of government, like different changing from an open town meeting, the legislature is likely to say,
Yeah.
yes, we're happy to pass this for you, but we also want it to go to the voters.
Yeah.
And so it's not required by the Constitution, but it's typical. The bigger the change, the more likely the legislature says it has to come back, because essentially they don't want to make the decision for all the voters who
reasonable.
don't come to town
That's
meeting.
reasonable.
So what about the ballot? Nothing on, it doesn't have to do anything on the ballot, right? Because it
So
has to go to town meeting.
it goes to town meeting first. And then once it goes to town meeting, you can add what's called a voter acceptance provision at the end of the charter or the charter document, the special act, so that it requires that it comes back to the voters. Or the legislature can say, we want this to come back to the voters. But the difference is if you use the petition process, it has to go to the voters.
Right. But what if the ballot vote is different than the town meeting vote?
Then that is the end of that. there's another opportunity, you can bring it back with
You mean if it didn't pass a town meeting and it did pass
Oh.
on the ballot?
if it doesn't pass a town meeting, then you probably won't have it on the ballot unless you're doing the petition process, in which case you skip town meeting altogether. So when town meeting acts on it, town meeting can authorize special legislation. And that's what we talk about when we talk about a home rule petition. When town meeting authorizes that, it goes from town meeting to the legislature. The legislature can enact it without any voter involvement. But the bigger the issues, the less likely the legislature says, we're gonna make the decision. And instead they put it back to the voters at an election. So that's the typical type of thing you'd see with a change like this. A creation of a town manager would be the same kind of thing.
So if it went back to town meeting, then if it was on the ballot, it wouldn't be on the ballot for a while. It's not like it would be on the ballot straight after while it's a hot topic.
Well,
Like it
that,
normally is
yeah.
for like debt overrides.
yeah, there's some truth to that. It really involves working very closely with your state legislative delegation, because what they can get passed and how quickly they can get it passed is really what defines how long it would take to come back before the town. So, there's times when a special act is taken care of in 6 months. If you guys were to do something, for example, at a November, at an October or November meeting, and your legislative delegation is able to push it through, they might be able to get it through for the upcoming election, 6 months or so out. But you really have to work with the legislative delegation to figure out the timing. Each legislative year is kind of different, so there might be some years in which it's better to do it earlier. And it also depends on the involvement of House and Senate Council. So I would recommend, if you are going to do a special act, that you have it vetted by House and Senate Council way before you go to town meeting. Because what you don't want to have happen is for it to get up there and have the House or Senate Council say, oh, you can't do this, or this isn't the right way. And they can make changes, even if they're limited. They can make changes if the town chooses not to let them make changes. Sometimes a bill will just sit, they just won't do anything with it. So.
Well, I
Yeah,
have
it's a
another
process.
question. If let's say we work very hard and in 3 months we come up with a report and recommendation. Am I correct that the select board can put that on the current warrant? Even though the citizens' date has passed? Can the select board take the initiative, Tom, to put that report on the next town meeting warrant?
Yeah, I would think so, but that's a major if, because there's a lot of stuff on the Springtown warrant, and this is a major my gut tells me this is a major change.
No, but they could if they chose to do it.
I guess theoretically, right, Lauren?
I don't believe that the prohibition or the dates for submission of articles applies to the select board.
Right.
As it does to the
And the
to private
frustrating thing
petitioners.
is, for the last several select board meetings, they've started looking at all the articles for next May. I mean, it take a year in advance, we're already starting to make a long list of stuff, and that's the frustration that's dragging.
I think one of the important things to think about is a report and recommendation could take a lot of different forms.
Mhm.
A report and recommendation could say, we want to leave things as is. We want a representative town meeting. We want a town council form of government, whatever it might be. But it may require that for the document that's going to make that happen, that may be a different thing. And so that could also change the timing. Because it's one thing to decide, yes, this is what we want to build, and then it's another thing to actually build it.
Lauren, in a town council form of government, so you end up with, let's say, 9 councilors or whatever you pick.
Not 13. I think 9.
No,
Nine's
okay,
good.
nine's a good number. So ultimately,
So does
you
Amherst.
you in effect do away with having to have town meetings.
Mhm.
You have counselors who can meet much more currently.
Yeah.
What happens at the select board, though? The executive function, is there still a select board that's, no? So now you have, who is the executive?
It could be a mayor or it could be a manager. So the town of Amherst is probably a good example because they changed from a town meeting, open town meeting to a town council form of government a while back. After Barnstable, it was more recent than that, maybe the past 5 years. And so, the select board authority goes to the executive branch, whatever that executive branch is going to look like. So in Amherst, it's the town manager. So the town manager is making appointments and executing documents and negotiating collective bargaining
And
agreements.
so is
Like-
Barnstable, Tom.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry.
No,
Chris. So, okay, I'm just sort of imagining, so, okay, let's say we were successful at doing that, you do away with town meeting, you have town council. And then Libby Gibson, who's currently the town manager, based on being hired by the select board.
Mhm.
Does she all of a sudden become an elected official? So that to be the town manager and the chief executive of the town, instead of, there's no one to hire her anymore, right?
It would be the
She's-
council.
The
The
council.
council
So
takes
the
that
council
authority.
would say, okay, we're gonna hire the CEO of our
That's
town.
right. That's the kind of few things that are different in terms of a council as compared to a town meeting. And one of those is appointment of the chief executive, if that's how it is. It could also be election of the chief executive, though. You know, it doesn't have to be appointed. That's another
Well, it
option.
certainly sounds like it expands the authorities and powers of the town manager, who under town meeting is has power delegated to him or her. And in this case is the CEO.
Same thing, isn't it? Really?
And I would say in my experience that town manager is still responsible to the town council for doing the things that the council has prioritized and identified. And so typically the council president is the person that would work the most closely with the town manager to run things. But the council's job is intended to be policymaking, as is the select boards these days. I mean, it's moving more and more towards just it's moving more and more towards policymaking all the time. You know, select boards used to run town hall, they used to run the town, and now a manager or administrator runs the day-to-day. So it is a little bit different, but there is still a boss. And the boss is the 9-member council in your example.
I lost track. We were comparing Amherst with our town.
Yes,
And we were looking at what is different between town manager and what is it in Amherst?
it's a town
It
manager.
is, okay,
Yeah.
and but is there a difference between those roles?
Well, there is, because here the select board maintains a significant amount of executive authority. And when you get rid of a select board and you create a city council and a manager, that power and authority goes somewhere. And typically, if you want your town to be able to run well, it's gonna go to the executive branch.
So if we had a town council in our present formation, Libby Gibson would have more executive power to make a parallel with Amherst.
Well,
Maybe.
it's not necessarily. I
I think it
mean,
depends on the charter.
it depends on the
On
chart.
how you, I
Yeah.
think, I guess the way I look at it in my head is. All of the power, if you put it into one pot, right, if you had 100 parts of it, the charter decides. How those 100 parts are carved
Mhm.
up. And you're never gonna exceed that 100, right, that's, you'd have 100 pieces. If right now it's 50-50 between the select board and town meeting, you change the council manager, you're just changing how that partition goes.
Hmm.
And the charter decides who does what functions
Mhm.
as part of that. So I
Yeah.
think what you're really incumbent upon doing is creating a system where, and I hate to be like third grade civics for this, but you're creating checks and balances
It's-
within your charter to make sure that it balances out.
And that's
That
exactly.
100 always stays intact.
Yes, that checks and balances system, that's the different in every chart, the difference in every charter.
Mhm.
That's why you sometimes have a town administrator that really has all the powers and duties of a manager. Or a manager that really has all the powers and duties of an administrator, because it's not what the name is given, it's what authority is
Mhm.
given to them in the document.
Mhm.
Well, it's interesting, that meeting we.
Yes.
The MMA, what is that, the Massachusetts
yeah.
Municipal association.
municipal system. I mean. They've talked for a long time about how, whether it's town administrator, town manager, really, the title doesn't mean a darn thing.
That's right,
It really, it's what authorities and powers that position is given
absolutely,
by the charter or the bylaws in a
absolutely.
particular town.
The only thing you're kind of stuck with is the difference between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Because that is the check and balance. You don't want the executive branch to be running around doing only what it wants, when it wants it. And you don't want the legislative branch to do that either. There has to be a compromise, and that there is a compromise in your current form of government. There would be a compromise in any change form of government as well, because that's the only way that you get things to actually work. And people sometimes say, well, it takes so long in government. Sometimes I reply by saying, I think it's supposed to. There's supposed to be checks and balances so that people don't run off in directions without any.
And I think it's important in that too, when you're divvying that up, to also provide a mechanism for continuity too. Right, you don't want to have to reshuffle the deck every time there's a question or do something.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the gravity of the group, or this situation where we're dictating the charter. So we need to.
Yeah, thoughtful.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, Lauren, I thought I heard you say that, you know, you have to figure out why you want to do this and what the reason, I guess I'm not sure as a group, we know why we're doing this, other than Curtis proposed this article to create an article for a future town meeting to allow the voters to pick either yay or nay for town council form of government. And, but in some of the stuff that I read, I said, it sure seems like, and these folks on the MMA call said yesterday, you know, why don't we take 3 recent, you know, town meeting to town council conversions, look at their charters and kind of, in effect, see how these other towns have done it. You know, as Nantucketers, I would think we could all say, okay, well, that might work for Amherst, but not for us. And,
Absolutely.
and sort of short circuit the process, because I guess personally, I'm concerned that, you know, if this committee could really get bogged down in discussing all sorts of details about town council, what it does, who it does. Gee, do we want to change the planning board from elected to, you know, and all of a sudden we could spend lots of time talking about interesting subjects, but not get towards the goal of getting an article on hopefully a year out town meeting. And I also think we have to remember to leave time and sort of energy for the communication and marketing of this, because, you know, we all just went through a special town meeting where the short-term rental thing crashed and burned for all sorts of reasons, but one of which was that, you know, the short-term rental work group really didn't spend a lot of time communicating why they thought their solution was a good one, and that came back to bite them. On this MMA call, I think a bunch of those town managers said the conversions that work are the ones where you have a lot of people who are out there communicating with, you know, homeowners associations and, you know, I mean, you look back on the job that Michael Kozort did to get the school built about 6 years ago. He spent a year schmoozing everybody and you could think of in the town.
That's
And
the legal term.
Yeah. It's a business term too. You know, and he did you know, you probably all remember, he did a fabulous job and that thing sailed through town meeting.
He is one of the people I had hoped might be a facilitator for us if we wanted a local person to do that. Because I think he's fantastic and he can help us.
So if I might,
Anyway,
one
sorry.
thing about the short-term rental work group, and we don't need to go into that, but one thing I did learn, which was interesting, is that the short-term rental work group had its purview and went through its work and spent 10 months doing it and came up with a series of recommendations and went to the select board and went to town meeting as special town meeting, as you all know. That they did a lot of work promoting that after they disbanded. But the funny thing is that they're a group of citizens, they're not an entity. So they don't have I'm gonna use general terms, but they don't have a budget. They're not like this entity that's driving the policy. They were a group of citizens who were talking to their fellow citizens. And in some ways, I see that just as somebody on this committee and as a citizen, whatever comes out of this committee is the same thing. So I don't think there should be any expectation of that. Whatever comes out of this committee, then there's a block of folks or whoever who has a budget and a marketing budget, and that's up to this group or whoever, you know, that's up to the advocacy process of citizen involvement. Yes, Jill.
Yeah, I agree with that, because the reality is we still live under the town, we have an all town meeting form of government now. So we still have to operate under that, and that is exactly right. That's something but if the select board is to generate the ultimate charter change and take that to the voters, that is significantly helpful. That doesn't mean that people don't vote what they put forward down, but we would have to.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece of it
And
there. So that alone would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
I was just gonna say, and that's what I meant when I was saying earlier, not only do you have to arrive at something here that you all agree, or at least a majority of you agree on, but then you have to sell it to the greater community. And so it's those two parts. And so sometimes you could have a great idea and think there's a terrific solution, but selling it is the hard part. So you really want to think about that while you're making your recommendations.
Jill,
And it is good that, sorry, Jeff, did you want to?
Oh, no, you go first.
That it's kind of good that the short-term rental work group happened most recently, because of course, in the select board didn't agree with what they did on certain things. And, you know, we just all need to be really mindful of that, and which is why it's good that you're here and you communicate back all the things that we're talking about.
Jeff.
But it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're also, we're kind of missing on the third phase, and as someone who's been involved with implementing successful and programs that have not been successful, that are essentially started the same way, right, is you have to do the analysis on why you're doing it. Do it. Get the education out there, but I think the part that we haven't talked about too is there also has to be the vision on how you're going to make that change, and how you're gonna implement it. I think that's gonna be one of the big challenges too, right? It's gonna be, I don't want to say it's gonna be simple, but for a group to sit around and put pen to paper for all these great ideas, you're gonna get to the point where you have all of the ideas. How do you convince people that they're good and that you can do them? And I think having that fourth step on there is something that's gonna be really important to
Yeah.
do. Because if you give them the light at the end of the tunnel, but then it doesn't lead to anywhere, then what did you do? It's a problem.
Some of the materials from these other towns that you can look at that have made the change, they have transition sections, but it really is a step by step. We're gonna have our election on this day, we're gonna do this on that day and this on Y day. So, but that is something, if you were gonna be putting together a comprehensive change, you can't leave out that part.
Yeah.
It
I
has to
think
have
that's
that part.
critical for gaining support at town meeting, just to say, and this is how we're gonna do it.
Caroline?
Thank you. I'm just checking, is that our purview? I agree, it's a good idea, but to figure out how once we come up with the problem and the diagnosis, as you were saying that we need to do, the analysis. Once we come up with all of that, is it still then our purview to figure out how to make the change and implement it, or is that something that then the select board has to figure out?
I think the answer to that, and I like to say it once every meeting is, it depends. It depends on what you guys see your job as, and if you go to talk to the select board, what they see as their job. Because you could say, I mean, there's a warrant article to study the potential change to a town council form of government, right? That's the warrant article, to come forward with a report and a recommendation or something. I can't remember the exact language.
Joe wrote it.
I have it right here.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It's in our packet.
the article that we passed basically says we will prepare an article for
Mhm.
future town meeting to basically vote yay or nay on a town council form of government. So
Yep.
I think the basic purpose is design the mousetrap, if you will, the charter and what the town council will look like, and spend a very significant amount of time in communicating why that's better than what we've got today,
Mhm.
and probably spending months out there, trying to convince the voters on this island that they want to change. Because the other thing I was struck by at the MMA call was there will be opposition. There will definitely be people who organize themselves and oppose a change to town council.
Sure.
Yeah, so to Rachel, one sec, I kind of want to, in the interest of time, we're at an hour, and I kind of want to tie up with some kind of future questions after Lauren completes the open meeting law part, and then we'll get into kind of future things, but I kind of want to leave us with 3 or 4 things to think about for our next meeting. And that's kind of exactly what you just laid out, is sort of everybody can come prepared to the next meeting when we schedule it, on kind of drilling down on future expectations. Like exactly, are we going to, just for argument's sake, in a year, come up with an article? What's everyone's beginning thoughts? Because I think this meeting was a bit of level setting. So we get a briefing from Lauren, from town council, and hear about different forms, and then kind of all disband and digest what we've heard today, because minds may change. There are some of us who may not know as much as others, so I think that's what was good about getting us all here today for an introductory meeting, was to digest some of this info.
So that's
Rachel.
sort of, I mean, I understand we're doing high level here, but we're referencing the charter, we're referencing all these things. We're gonna convince people whatever it is that this group decides and the select board. But does everybody actually know who has what authority in our current charter? Cause I would imagine that not everybody at this table has read it word for word recently, and I would assume the people we're trying to convince are probably the same. So I think maybe one of our bigger things of our next expectation is what exactly does our charter and whose authority is where right now? And then we should be drilling into not just the other forms, because like you said, you can kind of piece together what you like and what you don't. So what is the problem? And if we don't even know what our current charter really says and who has what authority, how can we truly identify it? I could say what I think the problem is versus Jill versus Bo versus anybody here. So I think that would be the one thing, because if I'm supposed to go around and discuss to people why I think we should need to move away from town meeting and go to a town council or change the appointing authority of XYZ, I need to have a solid understanding of what it looks like right now and why we should move to those things. And I don't have that. I have that from personal experience, but I mean, and again, like you said, the words could be the words, but every town has their own little way of doing that. And my expectation, I think, is one of these meetings should be dedicated to figuring out what exactly our charter says right now and what are truly the highlights. Cause I would imagine we're not completely scrapping our current charter. I would hope not, but I'm sure that there's parts of it that work well. And I right now couldn't list all of those parts. So that's just my thought.
Jill?
If I can just respond to that, I mean, some of that's just how the people who are elected interpret it as well, right?
Right,
So-
but even the people in the community, if you tell them something, I don't know, I just feel like we should have something that we're all looking at that says, this is what our current charter is. Cause if I'm supposed to have conversations with it, like I've already had, people are like, oh, you're on this committee, well, what do you see as the problem? Is it just town meeting? And I don't think the answer is,
Well-
it's just town meeting.
That's what I was getting at, because we talked about maybe having a clerk come in and talk to us about the different, like the change in voter registration. And how that's changed significantly, I'm sure, since over the years. And how many people come and what percentage of people come to town meeting and showing that decline, and that's probably one of our best selling points, not to get too fine a point onto it. And then to tackle on about the challenges with what you're saying, for me, the challenge to me, as I was kind of indicating earlier, is going to be, is this something the select board wants to put forward? That will probably, I think, be one of the harder hurdles, because if you get to them and they do want to do it, then yes, we can go out to the larger audience, but getting to that process and all the committees who may stay or go away, I mean, you're right, those are gonna be huge hurdles.
I agree with Rachel. I think first we identify what we like about it, the charter. And that we have some common ground on that, it moves this meeting along pretty expeditiously. But also the takeaway from yesterday's meeting from webinar was that to do this right, we want to maintain some flexibility in the charter. And we don't have to get too granular because there's bylaws.
And policies, regulations, yeah.
Curtis?
Well, I can give you a couple of examples why I brought this forward. The Airport Commission had some federal grant opportunities. But in order to accept them, they had to have matching funds. And annual town meeting had to appropriate the funds. And it took so long that the airport lost those federal grants for the airport. As a water commissioner, we have reserve funds in the water company. We had the opportunity to buy some affordable housing for staff. But we could not use our own reserve funds in the water company to execute before we went to town meeting and got the approval to release the funds from our reserve. And that was a year out, and we lost the affordable housing. So there are two examples that triggered my starting to do this, where the legislative function of a town council is able to respond more quickly, whereas the legislative function of an annual town meeting takes a year to do something, and we lost two types of grants because we could not respond. that's part of the trigger.
Kelly, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and it's actually kind of structural stuff, so we can table this. It seems appropriate. But when you were describing the legislative versus executive functions, is that relatively static, and are we just deciding over who's making decisions about like those functions proceeding almost?
So I would say it depends.
Mhm.
I mean, I can send you, I have a list of basically what I see as executive function versus what I see as legislative function. You can take a look at that. But executive function is carrying out of the duties of the town and the responsibilities of the town. And the legislative function is laying down the rules for that. And that's really how you can look at the two. The legislative body, as was just being stated, it can approve, it can make appropriations. I happen to do a lot of work in Amherst, so it's why Amherst examples are coming to me, but the legislative body in Amherst, for example, can't come up with an appropriation on its own. It has to start from the town manager, and I think Barnstable is a similar case, but I have to double check. And so that's one of those checks and balances things, so that the legislative body and the executive have to work together to make things like that
But
happen.
they
But
can
that's-
respond to the town
They can
manager
respond.
more quickly
Yes.
with a town council than they can with an annual town. meeting.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting differently. I'm just saying there's still procedural issues to look at in terms of how those things happen.
Sure.
But yes, it's no question that a town council can react faster.
So kind of following up with that question, are the checks and balances built into whatever, like we decide on A, B or C? Is there a check or a balance for that, what we decided on? Or are we deciding on where the checks and balances are?
To some extent, they're already there
Yeah.
and you're just deciding kind of how to implement them.
Mhm.
But there are some things like that are up for grabs because it's your charter and what you think is right. So for example, what level of confirmation do you want the council to have over manager appointments? Do you want it just to be the high level ones? Do you want them to be the low level ones? If you want them to be the low level ones, how does that affect the town's ability to hire and attract new employees, that kind of thing. So there are some things in there that they're going to require you to make some decisions about how to implement. But, could we make a list of those things? Probably we could. It wouldn't be like a foolproof, like, oh, here, if you figure out the answers to these, but I do think that as you go along and whatever amount of investigation you do at the beginning, what you like, what you don't like, or what works and what doesn't work, that's going to give you some examples or give you some insight into what needs to be different. Because what works and what doesn't work is exactly what you're talking about. You'd want a town council, for example, to be able to react faster to grant opportunities. Okay, so what does that look like? Where does that ability to bring an appropriation come from? So those are the kinds of triggers that you'd be looking for.
Got it. Lauren, do you want to continue on you're gonna do a little bit on open meeting law?
Yeah, now that we've had so much fun talking about charters, we'll just go right to the piece de resistance, which is the open meeting law. So I know many of you have worked in government or currently are doing volunteer work for government or employees, but public bodies are governed by a different set of rules in the public sector than they are in the private sector. Essentially, you aren't allowed to have a quorum of members talk about anything that's on your plate outside of a properly posted meeting. And that talking includes emailing. So I always say you can email to schedule. So can everybody meet on Tuesday at whatever time? Yes, no, yes. You can go back and forth like that. But the second someone writes something that shares their feelings, ideas, beliefs, or concerns amongst a forum, that violates the open meeting law. So great idea. We really need to hop on this fast because we have momentum. If we send that in an email to a quorum of the members, that would constitute a violation of the open meeting law. So one of the things that you really want to work on is having your conversations about these issues at the table. And you have a big group, so you're probably less likely to violate the open meeting law if you're talking to each other. But if you're talk to, 4 of you, then now you are at a point where if one member talks to another member, that's a quorum. And so at that point, you've expanded this private conversation to a quorum of members, which is inconsistent with the law. So using email, and, basically for communications about timing, places, you can send out information to each other that other people have put together. So the examples like what you brought today, that's fine for that to be sent out to all the members, but with a comment that says, please don't respond. We can talk about this at the next meeting. Because you don't want to by accident have someone write back and say, these are fantastic. Thank you so much. Now I understand.
We're just there to pick up.
No, I understand. But that kind of thing you can share. So let's say someone found the Barnstable County, the town of Barnstable charter and wanted to share it. That's fine. You can share that with the other members, but you don't want to go back and forth about what you like about that charter in an email. You want to do that when you're sitting at the table. The idea is the public gets to listen to your thinking about these things.
Now, you can do that through the chair of a committee, right?
Ish.
Ish.
That's also a legal term. You can, you could say to the chair, I would like to have this agenda item on, the next meeting notice. That's fine. I think it's important because blah, 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 and go through it. As long as you're just sharing it with the chair, it's not a violation of the open meeting law. But if you copied everybody with that same request and said, I think it's really important because now you're sharing your feelings, ideas, beliefs, and concerns, and that's a problem. So it is safer to do emails amongst, you and the chair, whoever the chair ultimately winds up being, rather than you and the rest of the group because of inadvertent open meeting law violations.
Right.
It's easy to press reply all with great point, violation of the open meeting law. And it's
Without
that silly.
computers, this never would have been a problem.
You are exactly right. No, then it was seeing someone at the coffee shop. That was a big deal because you'd run into someone and then they run into someone else and they run into someone else. So serial violations would happen that way, and they still can.
What if I wanted to take two people to lunch and talk out of the 7 or 8?
So that would not violate the law. However, if each of you talked to someone else and it got up to 5, then it would be a violation of the open meeting law. So I always say, anyone who ever used to watch Grey's Anatomy, you have your person that you kind of feel comfortable talking to. Just have one person, don't have more than one person, and you'll never violate the open meeting law.
In the email context, it's just like no sentiment of any form of
No,
bias.
yes,
bias.
ideas,
Okay,
feelings, beliefs, concerns.
here's this.
So
Yeah.
the way in my experience, I've always found it work best is if you have something you want to share, right? You find a journal article, someone's charter or something. Put an attachment, and we usually see it, our commissioners sometimes put FYI,
Yep.
and that's it. No thanks, no check it out, read paragraph 2, no, just plain attachment.
That's right.
Let it go. A lot of town boards just have a staff person. I don't have a staff person in this case, but it just hubs through there.
Yeah.
But don't. Text is not needed for attachments.
Right, and it's also not your own thoughts.
No.
So if you might have a staff person, say select board has a staff person that writes up an analysis of something that can get shared by the staff person to all the members of the select board without violating the open meeting law. But if it was, that you guys, one of you wrote up all of your feelings, ideas, beliefs, and concerns, and then shared it amongst the body, unless you're doing that at a public meeting and making it available at the same time to the public, then that would be a violation. So you can send someone else's charter, someone else's analysis, someone else's article. That's all fine, but I agree, you don't have to, it can just be an FYI.
Yeah, for select board, occasionally one of the members will want an article or something like that, and that goes to Erica, and Erica sends it to the board. But we never reply all.
That's right. Reply all, big red button, don't press it.
Just for my own sake of curiosity.
I'm wondering if we're ready to choose a chair and suggest an agenda for our next meeting and when the next meeting should be. So we
Donna.
keep this going.
Donna, we're gonna finish up this last bit on open meeting law, and then we're gonna move to agenda and future meeting dates. Comment.
Has
I-
nothing to do with this.
Okay, I guess the one other thing I should point out is the open meeting law and the public records law are involved with each other. So even if an email chain were to violate the open meeting law, it's subject to disclosure under the public records law. So anything that you send or receive in your official capacity as a member of this committee, you have to have the understanding that it could be subject to mandatory disclosure. So my recommendation is if you're going to be doing emailing about this stuff, you really want to try and have some sort of system for yourself that says, you know, town council group or something, so that you know when it comes in that it should go to a specific folder. Otherwise, if you get a public records request, you're gonna have to go through all of your emails forever and ever to see what you come up with, and it's really a drag if the public records request is made. So having some idea ahead of time, oh, I'm gonna save all my things related to this group in X folder is a really good way to start things off.
Would it make sense to get town emails?
I don't know about the availability of town emails, but I do know that a lot of people will make Gmail accounts for things like this. So town council study group, you know, whatever, john@gmail.com. So that way, any emails about this subject would all go to that account. Makes it easier.
Yeah, I don't believe that's possible to get town email, unfortunately.
Really?
I would imagine it's quite an expense, another expense, and I don't know, I have no idea, but
Well, that raises a question, are we gonna get a staff person from the town like FinCom has, or someone who can help coordinate?
well, that's part of what, no. The answer is no, as far as I know, but that's part of our discussion for the next meeting, which we can, Lauren, are you kind of
Yeah,
sort of tied up on open, okay. So I think we have a couple things before we disband tonight, which is come up with just a rough meeting schedule, at least for now. Choose our next meeting, and then kind of want to leave with a couple questions. And I think one of those questions will be in our packet was a list of professional facilitators that were gathered. I've worked with CBI, Consensus Building Institute. They were a facilitator for short-term rental work group. And also Judy Barrett was the planning consultant for the short-term rental work group. She's excellent. CBI was as well. And I'm not suggesting either of those, but these are pros. And I think we need to think about for our next meeting, kind of digest everything we've heard here and think about, we are going to have to post our own agendas, our own meetings. And one of us is going to have to take minutes. So I was kind of seeing it as the next meeting. Everyone can think about how much time they have and are able and want to put into this committee. Think about nominations for chair, vice chair, and possibly like a secretary, minute taker, agenda poster. Maybe that's the chair, but maybe I can say that between my job and select board, and I wouldn't do it as a select board member anyway, because again, my position's a little different, but I don't have time for that. There's just no way. So there may be other folks on the committee who would be better suited to that. So anyway, I thought it best for this meeting not to put us all on the spot, since few of us hadn't met each other, to say like, okay, let's just jump into officers. So I think it's better if we wait to the next meeting, plus it's on our agenda, it's on our posted agenda as well, to wait to the next meeting to come up with that. So I sort of see it as, we can just sort of check down the list. Is everybody thinking 2 weeks, 4 weeks? I mean, obviously we're getting into the holidays here.
2 weeks.
And what days work? We also need to find out, or one of us does, with the town if this room is available, Zoom capabilities, all that. I've never done that personally. And I think maybe we could sort of by consensus pick a soft agenda setter or chair tonight. Lauren, if you think that's okay, it delegates authority, the responsibility to work with the town to try and figure out when this room is available or something like that.
Sure, I think anybody can be authorized to do that.
Okay. Is there anybody, do we maybe accept a volunteer of somebody as a volunteer to kind of figure out when, say we pick a day right now and a time, say for argument's sake, it's 2 weeks at 4 o'clock from now and it's available. Maybe, is anybody would like to volunteer to be able to communicate with the appropriate person at the town to set that and then work on the agenda for the next meeting?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that.
Joe would be good at that.
Got it. Okay, great.
At least I know who to call first. So,
Got it. Okay, so if with Joe's volunteering to do the agenda, I am happy to write up as I said in an email that when we were setting the agenda, I'm happy to take the video and to do the minutes for this to be presented at the next meeting, to be affirmed by the committee. So that's officers officers will table for now until the next meeting. I got the minutes for this meeting. We can talk about who's going to take the next, if I have to start it for the next meeting, that's fine, but kind of think about chair, vice chair, and somebody to post. If it's not the chair, somebody willing to do agendas, minutes, and postings to get those appropriate, because they have to be posted within 48 hours and properly noticed, or we can't or we can't hold a meeting, of course. And then I think the other questions would be, as Lauren said, and it said in our packet, what problem are we trying to solve? Right. So I think it would be good if we come back at our next meeting to talk about what everyone's thoughts are on that, sort of as an extension of what everyone's expectations are. And I think Rachel's point on the charter and what our current form is and what responsibilities and duties are an excellent one. That is going to be an awful lot of work for a volunteer, in my own opinion. So that's why I personally see that a facilitator, a professional facilitator, is a really good idea to assist the officers in building the agenda and to know where the proper, we're not going to have Lauren here, unfortunately, for every meeting to talk about different forms and what's happened in other towns, because she's been through this with other the 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth. So we're just not going to have that. But I think my own opinion is that is absolutely necessary. But we'll see what the will of the committee is at the next meeting. And then as a furtherance of expectations, what does everyone think? I mean, not now rhetorically, but should an article come out for the 2025 town meeting, as Joe referred to before? Is this a shorter process, if that's even possible? Is it a longer process? Just kind of some general thoughts on that. I'm kind of digesting. And also the last thing I'll say is on the notes section on the bottom of the professional facilitator list, there's a couple notes on some kind of housekeeping / process things that I think we should be cognizant of. And maybe we can speak about that as Joe builds the agenda for the next meeting, especially the what problem are we trying to solve as it is enumerated here and as Lauren spoke to before. So I think our last bit of business is to choose just a general meeting date. How does everybody feel, if it's even possible, for this room and Zoom capability, hybrid capabilities, et cetera, for tentatively 2 weeks from today at 4 o'clock?
Do we have to lock ourselves into, it looks like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are busy days. What about Mondays and Fridays, which make, there may be more availability? I mean,
Yeah,
are we just stuck with a Thursday?
yeah, that's a good question.
Because I look at the town government study committee met on Mondays in the room up at Fort Fairgrounds. And it was wide open, although there's no Zoom up there, because I'm thinking, are we locked into this space versus other spaces where we have Zoom. If you have Zoom up on the second floor for fairgrounds, you can.
That space is no longer publicly.
Oh, all right, well, fine, but I'm just saying, less busy days are questions for me, whether a Monday or Friday is better. I'm open for whatever.
Scheduling is fine with open meeting law, right? And so that's okay on a Cheney. This is something that, you know, you could do a doodle poll or you pick a few dates or.
Joe sort of volunteered to talk, so maybe Joe can figure out what the biggest poll is every other week or so for the trailer.
Are there times that
days.
the people, that all of us, I mean, can't make meetings? I mean, should we focus on afternoon? I mean, Curtis, you mentioned midday, but I mean, I don't particularly like to meet in the mornings. I like afternoons.
Yeah, like 1 or 2 o'clock though. Why always wait till 4?
Well, why don't,
They were.
Yeah,
Yeah, is that better for you? Tim?
I prefer later. I know I'll get daggers from over the other side, but I prefer after 4 myself.
I can do later. I know I said I was flexible in the beginning. I'm in school. I'm in a Masters of Architecture program and I will have classes, I think, Tuesday, Thursday evenings. But I think it's like 7 to 10. So.
Well, I'm cool. I mean, what the heck, I just throw it out on 4 o'clock and off the damn.
I think maybe if we commit to a meeting like the week of December 11th, which would be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
If we know we have availability on certain times, maybe we can always do a doodle poll or for people to click onto for when they're available. See where that is and see when the room's available.
I mean, I'm certainly happy to call Erica and
Let's find out when the
find out
room's available.
what rooms are available the week of the 11th and what days, and I can certainly send everybody we'll be allowed to send an email that says, okay, here's our options, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday and Friday or something, and
Sure.
see what works for the group.
I would say time wise and scheduling wise for open meeting law requirements. I think we need to have that decision collectively made before Wednesday of next week. Because if it is that Monday, the 11th, we'll have to
What
have
is it?
that
It's what,
posted by
2 days?
Thursday.
Yeah.
2 days,
48 hours?
Saturday and Sunday don't count, so.
Right.
You have to get those in and it's by the hour, so if it's 1 PM on Monday, you have to have it posted by 1 PM on Thursday.
Yeah.
So,
Also, one of the things we do at Bentown is we have a hard stop after 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like short-term rental worker didn't do that. And, you know, you were under a real time constraint with that group, so I think it was different, but they're open, like, I don't really want a 4 or 5 hour meeting, and I don't think it's like,
Me
unless
neither.
it's like.
they're never productive.
So if everyone's comfortable with that, then you pick a time,
Yeah.
you take a stop. time,
Maximum
just say,
2
hey,
hours.
nobody says
Well, I'm
something.
a 2 hour.
Yeah.
We had 4 to 6, that works.
I say with random exceptions, like obviously,
Yeah.
if something's happening, you go 2:15, you go 2:15, but.
Okay,
Sure.
well, I'll check on what you know, what rooms are available that the week of the 11th, and in the, you know, I'll probably focus on 4 PM. That seems to fit, you know, okay, and I'll let everybody know. We're gonna make a decision.
I mean, as you worry, this room will be FinCom at 4 PM on one of those days, usually Tuesdays, Thursdays, but we don't have as many articles to share, so I'm gonna meet as much.
There's also another meeting in there that has capabilities. to-
And I can do Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that if there are subjects that people think we should talk about, you know, send them to Tom or me, and I think that's, you know, can we gather that?
Don't copy everyone.
Just send them directly, yeah, I'm just thinking about compiling a list
Yes.
of, not so much for the next meeting, but as we sort of start to plan out an agenda, you know, items and subjects we might want to talk about going out into 2024.
Donna, did you hear all that?
Actually, the next meeting, if we could make it louder, it's been hard to hear, but I didn't want to interrupt. But I also had a question, Tom, for you. When you referred to the list of facilitators, if I recall, Curtis has somebody in mind, and also the folks at MMA offered their services. Can we review those also as facilitators? Is that appropriate?
perhaps I think we should continue the discussion about a facilitator to the next meeting.
Okay,
Not a full tonight for this weekend, so. I'll hold off making it. I won't get in trouble on the first meeting.
Especially why I'm sitting here.
Can I clarify? Well, we can talk to other people in the community. I mean, I've been having interesting talks with people and
Absolutely.
people wanted. Okay, so there's no,
It's just a quorum of you guys.
and a quorum is how many people
It's
of us?
5 of you, there's 9.
So,
So
So we-
3 could talk.
and is that
In
okay? I
theory.
mean, I feel like I want to talk to everybody
Can't
all the
deliberate.
time, but.
So the problem of wanting to, if you talk to everybody
Mhm.
and you say, oh, I talked to Joe, oh, I talked to, oh, I talked,
Bingo.
then now there's an open meeting law violation. So that's the
pollinator.
problem. Yeah. So it is, regardless of how silly it might seem, if you assume that this is the norm, meaning talking about this matter here at this table, you guys will be in the best shape in terms of the open meeting law. But talking to other people not on the committee, you can do that as long as you would like, with however many people you would like, no violation.
I've always been curious about, with FinCom agendas. Can you only talk about items that are on the agenda? So you're having a meeting and you go through your agenda and then someone says, well, what about project X?
Yeah.
Right, since you have to talk about it in a quorum session, are
Yes.
you allowed to say, oh yeah, and let's have a conversation on project X? But or do you have to wait till the next,
So the law says that you can talk about things that are reasonably anticipated by the chair, so on the agenda, whatever it might be. But if there's something that's not reasonably anticipated by the chair, the body is not prohibited from discussing it. However, the AG recommends, and I think they use the word strongly recommend, that you push it forward to a meeting where it can appear on the agenda so that people are informed who want to
Right.
participate. But yeah, if someone brought something up randomly that seemed like it was important to speak about right at that moment, you can speak about it. Without
Would you just
violating.
Put an agenda item, a standing agenda item that says new business, and then anybody that brought it up, you would normally recommend to put it as an agenda item on a later date.
I would say if you're gonna do new business, I'd put a little star there and say something like, this agenda item is intended to notify you that someone might bring something up that the chair did not reasonably anticipate. Something like that. I can give you the actual, like, there's a thing that we'll
Yeah.
recommend. Yeah. Cause you can't have just standing new business, old business. You have to have, your agendas have to be detailed. But if you have a new business item there so that people know that that's a possibility, then that seems acceptable.
And it's very exceptional, like if somebody provided me something 2 hours before the meeting and I said I wanted to share this to talk at a later date.
That's right.
That's just technically a new business, it's a new topic being brought up, but I would probably recommend it being an agenda item.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this meeting's case, it'd be something where like Curtis was approached by Gregory to come and give an update on the committee tomorrow. And he wants permission to go do it, that, or something came up like that. It's time sensitive.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Jill, second by Curtis, do by roll call since we have a hybrid. Rachel?
Yep. Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Bo?
Aye.
Curtis?
Aye.
Kelly? Aye. Joe?
Aye.
Caroline?
Hi.
Jeff?
Aye.
Donna?
hi,
Oh, she's not voting. That's okay. Thank you all.
thank you.
I don't think I've ever
what's
gotten
on
to
the
vote
other
on
side.
It's
If there are other.
She's acknowledging.
Either email me or probably what